Right, can everybody see?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is my set of slides here, the slide deck for the Model 9 Final Capstone project. So what I ended up doing was building out a threat intelligence dashboard with Power BI, and I collected various data sets for malicious IPs using Python scripts. I'm not a software engineer by any means. I did use some assistance with my trusty Copilot to get concepts and syntax down, but after a lot of trial and error and just kind of rerunning code and banging my head against the wall for a couple of weeks, I was able to get it going. So just go ahead and get started here. So again, designed a threat intelligence dashboard to analyze known malicious IP addresses. So the initial list of IPs, after doing some research, I was able to find a source called IPsum. It's just an IP, publicly available block list or blacklist, whatever you want to call it, of IP addresses that have been shown to be associated with some kind of malicious activity or scanning or some kind of honeypot, etc. So I also collected, to enrich those IPs, I collected geolocation data from ipapi.com. So it gives country, region or state, city, and latitude and longitude as well. Um, I learned about Shodan through one of the workshops, so I decided to incorporate that as well. So it's a search engine that scans the internet for exposures such as open ports, service banners, operating systems that are associated with those IP addresses, as well as common vulnerabilities and exposures. So I wasn't familiar with this going into that, but I learned about it as I was doing the project. So basically, there's different sets of vulnerabilities and exposures that are given a code in the NIST National Vulnerability Database, and then you can kind of read a description about it there. And then lastly, I used Alien Vault Open Threat Exchange. It's just kind of another way to enrich the IP data that I gathered, giving more information via what were called pulses that describe kind of what happened, that kind of caused the IP to appear, presumably on the block list. So things like malicious activity, attack patterns, families, or indicators of compromise. And once again, all data was collected through Python scripts stored in MySQL tables for further analysis and visualization later in Power BI. So I kind of ran everything locally as far as the SQL database in my own system. So I wasn't hooked up to the cloud or anything, so I obviously couldn't submit that. And Ryan already knew, but I'll try and show you guys that here as we go forward. So starting off the procedure, first thing I did was create the database inside of MySQL. This is the script that I had. So first I created a database called Threat Intel, and then I used that to create a table within it called Threat Indicators. And so I had to do some research about this. I had some exposure to SQL years and years ago, but basically I just created a table that would store data as characters and an associated timestamp with it. That's what this means. And then this is just kind of a sanity check to make sure it was made correctly. So I showed the databases. These were all the different databases in the schema inside of SQL. Then here's the threat intel database. So it was successfully created. All right, so this is the part with the script. So I wrote a Python script to gather, again, the first thing I did was gather IPs from IPsum. And then after I made sure it was working, I edited the script to then enrich those IPs with additional geolocation data. So just going over that here briefly, I won't bore you guys too much with the details, but I started off by importing all these libraries. Um, so this requests one allows data to be downloaded from an external URL, which you need to communicate with IP API, for example, or Shodan, or the Alien Vault Open Threat Exchange. And then this one, Pandas, I didn't really use it, but I just put it in case some calculation needed to be done or some other data handling. I imported my SQL connector. This was what allows the Python script to communicate with the SQL database. And then again, this is the date time part, so it allows it to um, create timestamps when the indicators were retrieved. So that just creates the timestamp that I did it on this date rather than when it showed up on the list. It wasn't really useful, but it's there. And then this one here that says from .env import. So I didn't want to just, considering that I'm a cybersecurity student, I didn't want to just type my SQL password in here, right? So I created a separate file that this script would read, and then it would take that and then send that over to the SQL program and put the information in that way. So that way it's not visible here in case it was exposed for whatever reason. Um, and then this is just the establishment of the connection. And then this is a cursor so that it can type. This wasn't here at first, but I can just describe it really quick. This is the function that actually does the request to IP API, and then it returns all of these items here. So this is useful, this IP one here, because it kind of makes sure that whatever IPs that I first retrieved from IP sum, it looks for those IPs that match up. So it doesn't just gather everything that they have. Otherwise, that first step of gathering the IPs is useless. Um, and then this is the URL for IP sum. And then this is how it kind of goes through and creates the data within MySQL here. Excuse me. So it's just this one's reading through line by line in IPSum, and then this inserts the collected indicators into the MySQL table. This commits the transaction and saves the changes to the database. I put this here so that way, as it was running, because I had to run it overnight, it was taking forever because of speed throttling due to free limitations. That way, I can just kind of look over in MySQL and just select the entire table and just make sure that it's actually putting things in there. And then finally, this is just making sure that um, if there is a duplicate, it doesn't make duplicates. And this is again another loop to create the loading bar. So I think I skipped that up here. Import TQDM. So this creates a loading bar in the script. All right, so that's pretty much it for the script for this first part. And then this was the result. So as it was running, I just kind of watched the script here. As you can see, it took hours and hours. And then finally, once it hit 100%, I went through and checked to make sure um, that the data was gathered properly inside of the table in SQL. And then probably can't really see it here too well, but I can show you guys the table in Power BI. But these are all the different geolocation data items that were associated with these IP addresses that I gathered that return something because they didn't all return something necessarily. All right. Any questions so far? Okay.
I think you're doing
Yes.
great.
Oh, thank you, sir.
No
Appreciate it.
questions.
All right. Okay, so I just once I finished that part, I just wanted to make sure that this is feasible. I did have some experience with Power BI in my prior job as a system engineer, looking at, certain things that they had me look at. Um, but so this is what I did here for this project. The first page was called malicious IPs. So, and I'll actually show you the Power BI here as well in a moment. This just counted all of the IP addresses that I collected at first. So it was over 200,000. This donut chart here just shows kind of proportionally the different IPs and their IP class based on the range of the first octet. And then here's just another way of visualizing it as a tree map. So this number here, for example, was 103. This was the most common one out of all of these in class A, for example, if you wanted to see which classes of IPs appeared most often. And then this next page was called geolocation. Um, so you can see here that the number decreased dramatically. That's just because that's all the data that I could retrieve for the set of IPs that I had, and that's kind of outside of my control. Um, but over here we have a bar chart, IPs by country, and actual, you know, geolocation of the, how should I put this? Like the way I think of this is it's not necessarily the actual device or person or place, but it's more like a portal from which a threat came out because people could be using VPNs or, a botnet or something. But this at least gives you a visual of where things are out there in a sense. At the bottom here is just all the data in front of you. So if you wanted to scroll through it, you could see it. And then on this side um, are different filters for country, region, state, city, internet service provider, IP class, or autonomous system number. So these are just different items that came back from the geolocation data. And then again, this note here is kind of just what I said about the the not necessarily exact location, just a disclaimer. So for the sake of time, for Shodan, I did something very similar with the script. It just went out, um, gathered the data, brought it back into MySQL, and then I took it and put it into Power BI again. So here was the result. Something to note about the Shodan data. It comes back as a JSON blob. I didn't know what this was at first when I was doing this. But basically what it is just like a long list of um, information separated inside of one cell. So what I tried to do at first was try to figure out how to incorporate this into the script itself to separate everything into the SQL table. But then I remembered that Power BI has a function specifically for this. So in here, this is the view inside of Power BI in the table view. Inside of parse, there's a function here called JSON, and it just parses the data out and then creates columns for you. You don't have to worry about it. It's just done deal right there. So that was much simpler than trying to go through the headache of figuring out the script for that. Um, I had a Shodan account for this, so there was no speed throttling. I just had to leave it on for I think it was like a half hour or so. But yeah, so that was just done right there. It was pretty simple. And then here, this page was called Shodan. So you can see again the number of instances dropped again because there was a throttling of like the number of requests I could do. Same thing happened with the Alien Vault OTX, but that's okay. It at least worked, and I was able to get good data from that. So on the left side here, we have all these codes. So I didn't know what these were at first, but I saw them in the data and I decided to figure out what they were. So this bar chart just shows anytime an IP is associated with one of these codes, it's added here. This isn't a unique or distinct count because sometimes an IP address will show up with multiple of these codes. And then just as an example here, if we look at the second one from the top, CVE 2008-3844, if we look at that inside of the vulnerability database from NIST, we can see what it means. So it's a media server and Android before 2016 on Nexus 9 and Pixel C devices that allows attackers to gain privileges via a crafted application. So that's pretty cool, I thought. So you can kind of just go through and see what each of those things mean using this. And again, I just left the map here just to keep the visual consistent. Same thing with the table. Over here, I have open ports. So if you have open HTTPS ports, for example, or Telnet or something, you can see the count of different IPs associated with that. And then again, same thing with Alien Vault OTX. Just made another script that does the same thing. Um, In this case, I was limited specifically at 100 requests. Once I hit 100 requests, it just said over throttling limit because it stopped working. I didn't know why, so I had it print out um, the result each time, and then I saw this, and I was like, okay, it's just going to be done there, and so I don't have to leave it on forever. And then I pulled that into Power BI, and then we can see like, so this came as pulses, so pulses and pulse tags. I had to create another table for this because these all came as unique names like honeypot, cowrie, honey trap, and so on. But these are all associated with honeypot, it turns out. So I had to do some research to figure out what all of these can kind of be grouped under. So I did that. And then instead of having a bunch of unique names here, you have groups. And then if you want to open one up, you can see the different tags that showed up from the data underneath that group. And then over here, we have, again, similar to the last page, just a bar chart with different counts of the different tags of whatever the issue may have been, like SSH, honeypot, scanners, voice over IP attack, things like that, as well as the locations in here in the table. All right, so and then I had to as well create relationships inside of Power BI to make sure that all these different things can talk to one another properly. So hopefully you can see this, but over here for the first table, threat indicators that just had the IPs, it was a one-to-one relationship between that one and the geolocation data because one IP goes with one set of geolocation data. And then here, from that first table down to the Shodan table, it's a one-to-many because it's repeated. Same thing for the OTX enriched. And then this is the other table that I mentioned a second ago, just about creating the tag type underneath the tag and creating groupings so that way it's just not a ton of unique or things that look unique when they're not. And then as far as potential improvements, if this was like a production level tool, for example, there could be automated data pulling intervals like once a week, eliminating speed and threshold limitations with paid memberships, cloud database for collaboration rather than the local one like I have now, seeking out other data sources because these were not the only ones. This was not exhaustive by any means. There are plenty of other places to get data from regarding this. Um, Protecting the source code by removing the comments that I have, so that way, in case it's exposed, someone can't just read it in plain English and know what it does. Improve error handling. So this was a learning moment for me. So I noticed that when I was using the Shodan script, it just crashed, and then I realized the reason for that is because for some reason, whenever I was reaching out for data that is associated with the current, line in the IP address loop. If there was a problem or if it didn't return something or if there was some error, maybe it didn't match up to anything, it just crashed. So I had to make sure that it would skip that. And then finally, just using a more secure way to use the API key in the script rather than hard coding it. Because for Shodan, I just put the API key in there. So I could have maybe made an environment in the same way that I did with the first script in a separate file. But that's pretty much it for the slides. I'll go into the Power BI next just for a short demo. Any questions so far?
I don't have any.
Okie dokie.
Nope. Nope. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay,
Keep going.
appreciate it. Okay, so here's the actual Power BI software. So this was that first malicious IPs page that just gathered the counts of everything. Pretty simple, just the donut chart here and the tree map. And then you can actually click these. So if I click this first one, it'll show you how much of the donut this is associated with, and then how many counts of IPs are there. And you can do that for any of these that you want to. Next, the geolocation data. So this is the one that just showed where the threat appeared to emerge from, I guess I can say. So if you want to just look at the US, you can click this bar. It'll zoom in over to the US side, show you all the different things that emerged. You could click this big circle here, or excuse me, highlight this, and it will give you a little tooltip that shows you the latitude and longitude and um, the count of IPs associated in Washington, or excuse me, in Seattle, Washington, for example. You could do that all throughout here. If you wanted to look specifically in Washington, we could go to this filter here. If I go down to United States and look for Washington, Seattle, it'll just zoom into Seattle and you can see all the different, portals where things emerged from, if you will. And then down here, if you want to look even deeper, you can look at the IP class. So in this case, it was a class associated with Google Cloud, the internet service provider, the autonomous system number, which is pretty much the internet service provider or an organization that that internet service provider is associated with. So if, for example, you're seeing a bunch of threats show up from, you know, Nobis Technology Group and LeaseWeb USA, you could keep that on watch, or maybe if they're not aware, they could be alerted, for example. Okay. And then if I go back here, clear these. Sorry, just bear with me here. I clear that. Okay. So that's pretty much it for the geolocation stuff. For Shodan, very similar. If you wanted to, it's just different as far as what's being presented. So if you wanted to just focus in on this particular exposure code, you can see all the different places where that shows up. If you wanted to look at where port 443 is open, you could click that and it'll show you that as well as the associated items here. So you can see the open port, domain name, operating system, organization. Didn't always return everything. Sometimes these cells are blank, so that's normal, I guess, in this case, because everything else works. So they might have just not had data for that. Here you have a Google domain name in Singapore, um, True Host Cloud in Dallas, and so on. You can kind of just go through and click any of these that you want. And if you wanted to, maybe search up what does port 3389 do or 53 and so on. And then finally, here's the Alien Vault OTX. So this kind of goes into the nature of the malicious event or whatever the case may be. So same idea here, just a little bit different organization. So let's say I wanted to look at SSH stuff. If I click that, it'll show me where all these things appeared, the count of them. This isn't unique, so there might be multiple IP addresses here. But we have some in China, Japan, Vietnam, and so on. And then if you wanted to like zoom into a particular area, Tanzania, we have in this area here. If you highlight it with the tooltip, same idea. It shows you all that information there. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this. Any questions with this at all? Any feedback?
I have feedback and I have
Yes,
questions. I have
sure.
have a few simple questions and I have one question that I'm curious about. First of all,
Okay.
this was amazing. This was
Thank you.
this was just rock solid. I really like it. I, I love how you have the interactive map going on. I like how you can scan the ports and you can even tell, uh, not on this, yes, on this page, whether it's, yeah, there you go. The ports. Um, like I'm particularly interested in the 11 port 80s that we're looking at there. That's pretty neat.
Mhm.
But this was amazing. I've got a few things wrote down here. Uh, one of the questions I'm curious about,
Sure.
how whenever you were creating the script and you had the
hmm
password written
hmm
pulling from somewhere else, how
hmm
how did you have that read it where it was not
Sure.
vulnerable?
Sure. So, um, let's see where I have it here. So, I had to look into this a little bit, but what it is there's this library called .env, and so it's a loader that allows you to read something from a .env file which I had to create, which is this here. It's basically just a text file. So if say my hard drive were to get exposed or something, that would be there. But at least it's not in the script. I wasn't sure how else to make it more secure just with the resources that I have, right? But what it does is it'll open this up. Like let's say I open this up with, um, actually I'm not going to do that. That's probably not a good idea. But if I were to open this up, you would see these items here, but where it says os.getenv, this is what takes that line or that item, that descriptor for the password, and takes that, and then here where it says con equals mysql.connector.connect, it goes there and puts that into MySQL because this was imported up here, mysql.connector. So that's what allows the script in Python and MySQL to communicate with one another. So it would communicate with this database here. And
Got
so
it.
on login, or when it asks for the password, it would know how to put the password in. Of
Got it. All right. Well, thank you for that. That was really cool.
course.
Um, um, so out of this whole project, this is really neat. Out of this whole project, while you were building it and while you were running into issues that you had to research, what's the one thing that you brought out of this entire experience?
Oh man, there was so much. Um, so just just writing scripts in general. I've never had to actually do something like this. I've had like experience with like, courses and understanding the syntax and the nature of object-oriented programming, what that is in that sense. But as far as actually using it for something useful, I've never done that before. So that was probably the biggest hurdle because, it's not really even learning how to ride a bike. It's more like, learning how to play chess while riding a bike while doing something else. Like that's the best way I can explain it. But that was probably um, one of the biggest things that I learned. The other thing as well was just all the different meanings of things that I gathered. So um, the IIP class was a bit of review, but actual like, not this page, this one. So like these codes here, never seen these before. Reviewing open ports and things like that. I by no means have these memorized. I have to look these up sometimes, but I'll be studying for that. But just actually taking a bunch of data that's cybersecurity related or threat related, and then finding a meaning out of it. Because just gathering this alone is just you're just going to get a pile of numbers and words. But taking all of that and organizing it in such a way that you can get some kind of how should I put this? Like get some kind of insight from it. So, like for example, like if I just look at all the data, it doesn't make sense. But if I take it and visualize it this way and show it to you guys or show it to whoever needs to see it, um, we can see maybe, for example, like if we're seeing a lot of threats coming in from this area, we might need to be, watch that area a little more or block any IPs coming from that area and so on. So it was kind of a exercise in seeing how this could potentially work, in like a job or something. So rather than just doing it, a neat project that works and it looks good, I was trying to make it function in a sense that the concept itself could potentially be useful.
Well, it was amazing, and thank you for presenting. I'm gonna turn it over to either Jasmine or Gabriel.
I think Gabriel had a question. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, I was just sitting here like, wow, this is very, I know Ryan used the word amazing. It's very impressive too.
I appreciate that.
Very, very impressive. And I'm sitting here, I haven't seen many reports like this. So this is a great credit to you, even using VS Code, Python, SQL, and stuff that you learned on your own to be able to put it in this project. And then I see when you were sharing your code, something that really stood out to me, which is really cool, is you said that, we always put comments, right? We always put comments, and obviously you want to get rid of it because you don't want people to see it. So that was
Right.
a pretty good catch that you're able to secure something like that where not anybody else has seen it. I just don't. And the only question I had is, did you ever think of like the git ignore or anything like that, just to hide the files while you were doing it?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I think it cut out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I was very impressive with the comments, like making sure
Uh-huh.
that you take off the comments.
Right.
But sometimes we need them, right?
Of
Did
course.
you ever did you ever consider anything with like just putting in a new folder like with a git ignore file?
I'm not actually sure what that is. Is that like a separate file that you could like
Well,
just
it's
write
just something that you don't
documentation?
want. It's something you don't want tracked. No, don't worry. I was so impressed by everything that you were doing, and I'm learning myself. We're all learning. That's something that I've learned here. Is
Sure.
we're all learning, but I'm listening to you, and I'm like, man, this is so great. It's like I wasn't this advanced the way you just presented this. So good job.
I appreciate
I'll
that.
leave that at that. Okay, Ryan, I'm good.
All righty. Well, and Jasmine, if you have any questions, just start talking. Um,
Yeah, we do. But that's,
all right, go ahead.
I didn't
Sure.
really have any questions, but I am loving how you took, and maybe you did this on purpose, maybe you didn't, I don't know, but you did, like Gabriel was saying, kind of merged cybersecurity and a little bit of software engineering in together to to build it, to hunt for things. And I had to keep reminding myself that this was a cybersecurity presentation,
Hmm.
not, software engineering. And
Right.
um,
I was
Did
kind of forced to by necessity. So I wasn't
no, but
planning on doing that, you know? I wasn't
no,
planning on this at all.
I think that it's great. And I was thinking, he said engineer. Does he have a or software engineering? Like, is that something that you did like in a previous life? Like,
No.
it's kind of
So
like,
I was a medical device engineer. So I worked at a company called KLS Martin, that uh, manufactured 3D printed titanium implants, cutting guides, marking guides, things of that nature for the craniomaxillofacial area. So anything having to do with the skull, maxilla, so like the face bones, the ocular area around your eyes. Um, so I didn't do any of that, in most of my time there, but towards the end of my time there, or like, the last, you know, 6 or 7 months, I started getting into Power BI. And what I was using that for was to um, figure out where issues were happening. They didn't really have a good solution for that at the time. Um, so what I did was improve upon and add to what they already had. So they had things called non-conforming material reports, or NCMRs, which is all that means is that something had a design flaw or a manufacturing flaw or some other flaw in the documentation, paperwork, whatever the case may be, that almost left the door and went on the way to the surgeon and patient, right? So what I was doing was looking at all that, seeing what happened, and then pinpointing where the mistake was made, like the root cause of the mistake or the error, what have you. And then I took all of that data and made dashboards, similar to what you're looking at here. So from there, I was able to present that type of stuff to management, trend it over time, um, show counts as to what particular issues may be, hot ticket items for that month with a Pareto chart, things like that. So it was a bit more complicated than this as far as the presentation part, but building this, like actually making it work, was much harder than what I did at work. So at least I had a foundation for Power BI, but the rest of it I had to just figure out.
well, I just want to say that's amazing. I would not have even needed, I would not known where to go with any of that. And if you're still wanting to further continue your education, I think that you would just knock it out of the park and be so amazing as in software engineering. I'm just going to put that out there.
I
I don't know
appreciate
what your
that.
goals are, but like, wow, that like, yeah.
I'll definitely
Anyway,
keep that in mind, but
well
I'll
done.
I'll
Good
probably
job.
stick with cybersecurity for a little while. It's
Yeah.
so cool. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you for presenting.
Of course.
Um, you can go ahead and stop the recording there, Gabriel, because we'll be talking about some personal information.